Good morning, and once again, I'm Pete Najarian, and this is The Take for Market Rebellion on this Tuesday morning. Wow, it's nice to get to Tuesday after what we saw yesterday and some of the bloodbath that we were watching, especially during that middle part of the day. It was unbelievable. The selling pressure started at the beginning of the day. It continued to pressure very much so until the last 90 minutes or so. And call it the last 75 minutes really. And then we had a major recovery. We look at the Dow was down over 900 points, actually recovered enough. Finished down 500 points sounds terrible, but relative to where it was, certainly down 800, 900 points for the majority of the session. That rally at the end of the day actually certainly helped out a lot. Similarly, take a look over at the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ under some huge pressure yesterday, only to finish down 14 points. An amazing recovery. 260 points off of the lows. It jumped 170 points in those final 75 minutes of the trading session. So it does give you an idea of how much pressure there was on the markets, but also that buying that stepped in, and suddenly the markets really had an incredible shift to the upside, not finishing in the green, but certainly a major move to the upside. Great example of that was Apple yesterday. It was trading on the lows around 103, finished the day somewhere closer to 110, finished near the highs of the day, and it was up 3% on the session. So that was pretty impressive to watch that name. There were many other examples, Amazon as well. Amazon rallied nearly 100 points in the final 75 minutes of the day to finish flat. Netflix was mostly in the positive for most of the day, and a lot of that having to do with that stay-at-home stock sort of an idea. A lot of the pressure that we were seeing yesterday were on the names that were the reopening names, and maybe there's going to be a bit of a pause there. And because of that, those were the names that were under pressure. But the stay-at-home names that people have been so familiar with were some of the names that were reacting pretty nicely for most of the day, Netflix being one of those. I'll tell you what, another one that was moving around, Tesla. We had some major moves there yesterday, certainly. Technology, huge recovery, absolutely huge recovery. But the financials, they were under pressure throughout the session, down, as a matter of fact, finishing down about 2.5%. Materials were down over 3%. Consumer discretion, healthcare down a little over 1%, almost 1.5%. Chips actually, because of that rally late in the day, the final 75 minutes actually finished, call it flat. So what were really some of the drags on the Dow? Still finished down over 500 points. So what was pulling it? Financials certainly contributing, industrials as well. I look over at Dow, 3M, Caterpillar, Honeywell, Boeing, and then look over at American Express, JP Morgan. All of those names still finished off about 3%. So some major pressure there. There's no doubt about that. We closed the volatility index still on the lows, which was great, but still in the upper 20s. We were at a little over 27 and change, call it near 28 on some very, very high volume again. And the volumes have absolutely returned. We talked about that towards the latter part of last week. Yesterday, another day, well over 30 million. As a matter of fact, finished up at over 33 million. What were some of the biggest names? Apple stood out, 2.2 million contracts. You had 950,000 in Tesla. Microsoft, about 360,000. So some nice activity. Certainly you could see by that, though, Apple very much the standout, which is pretty consistent. Apple consistently will lead, it seems like, almost every single day with a few exceptions here and there. But generally, Apple's going to lead. But 2.2 million, that's a pretty decent number out of Apple yesterday, as a matter of fact. So as we jump into today, that big setup from yesterday, we jump in today. We're getting closer and closer to earnings season, by the way. And that's something that's kind of something that the markets, I wouldn't say weighing on the markets, but certainly a focus of the markets. How about that? And as we get into that, we had a really calm pre-market, absolutely calm. Felt like a storm had gone by yesterday. The calm had come, the sun had come out, and things were looking pretty decent. And they still are. As a matter of fact, you look at the pre-markets, we had a nice little bounce out of technology, some consumer discretionary as well, moving to the upside very quickly into the day. We're only 30 minutes into the day right now. Very quickly into the day, we had the markets actually up about 100 points. We started up about 80, 90, then we pushed up. We were up 100 points on the Dow. That quickly has flipped. The NASDAQ was up about 50 plus points. That's pulled back a little bit. I'm looking at the Dow right now. Now we're down about 30 points. As I say, we were up 100 points very early on. We're only 30 minutes in. That gives you a little idea of the velocity of these moves within the market itself. The NASDAQ still holding in there pretty well. As a matter of fact, what are some of the names that are moving around in the markets? And actually, when we've been pushing to the upside, both in the Dow and the NASDAQ, what was really powering that? Apple, Microsoft, Intel, Amazon, Twitter, Facebook. You get sort of the idea here. A lot of technology, a lot of that big five participation. We also had a nice bounce out of some of the airline stocks as well. Hotels, Marriott, throw that in there. So that's been nice. But energy really did stand out for me as I'm going through and I'm looking around, and I just wanted to see some of the internals. I looked over at energy. I see Chevron trading pretty well, at least early on, and some of those high beta names. You look over at the OIH and some of those names with a nice performance early on and a little bit of a bounce as well there. Industrials certainly today do stand out as well. Lockheed Martin, one of those names, and throw in those rails as part of the industrial, CSX, UNP. We had Raytheon and Boeing back to the industrial. So a lot of movement there, and that really was powering what we'd seen early on with that triple-digit move to the upside. And as I just mentioned, we have pulled back. Now we're down about 30 points. So we're going to be shifting around certainly, and shoot, we're going to have to see what happens in that final 75 minutes. We got a busy day in front of us. I will be on the halftime today. You can see I'm dressed a little bit nicer. I'm not in my golf shirt today. I got a little bit of work with CNBC, so you'll see me at noon. Powell, Mnuchin, they're going to be up on the hill. That'll probably interrupt us at least a little bit, maybe in the early portion of our hour, but we'll see how that all plays out. You never really know. Volatility index, yes, still right in there in that upper 27s. So that's something that, we've got some volatility. And that's telling us that we're not quite moving at a 2% rate, but we're certainly moving well over 1%. Call it maybe a little bit closer to 2% move. And that's exactly what we have been seeing. Some great intraday movement and some opportunities, in my opinion, have been popping up. And speaking of opportunities, we'd like to talk about the unusual option activity. We got about 6 hits in the first 30 minutes of the day, at least 6 hits on the unusual option activity. And I had to make some selections, and I just decided, you know what? Some of these make sense depending on where the markets are going. This one just sort of stood out to me because it's a name that hasn't been talked about in a while. It's amazing how the focus can move from one name to the next, to the next, to the next, and you start to forget about some of these names. Beyond Meat, this stood out, BYND. The reason this one stood out for me was we haven't talked about it in a really long time. I haven't heard really a lot of conversations about this on the networks or anything in terms of the financials, but the financial networks. But with the Beyond Meat trading at 154.50, we had a buyer of 3,300 of this week. Yes, September 25th. Today's 22nd. This week expiring 155s, right out of the money. These are 50 cents out of the money. They were going initially for about $2.50. That escalated very rapidly as they started acquiring more and more. Initially, some early buyers, but also, as I mentioned, about 3,300 of these. So as that buying continued, that premium started to go up. Stock started to move a little bit. I'm not sure where it is now because we've had that movement. Dow right now, down about 40 points. NASDAQ's up 33 points. That disconnect coming back into play. I'm looking at the volatility right now. We're just underneath 28. So expect some roller coaster moves today again. I don't know if we'll see anything close to what we were seeing yesterday because that was the market that was pressured very early on, and then it just continued through the rest of the session until we finally had that nice start to buying that we saw in, like I say, the last 60, call it 75 minutes of the trading session. We'll see what today is going to bring. That has been a theme, though. We have talked about this time and time again this year, not just volumes, but the theme of the last maybe hour and a half or thereabouts of the trading session, how much can change in that last 60, 90, 120 minutes of the trading day. And oftentimes we have watched it, it seems like time and time again. We'll see if that comes into play today as well. Folks, have a great day of trading. I will see you on the halftime report today. Hopefully we'll get to some new unusual option activity. I got all kinds hitting, as I said. There were 6 in the first 30 minutes. By the time we get on air, we're going to be multiple hours into the session. I guarantee you we're going to have some great unusual option activity. Going to be answering some questions for the halftime report as well that are going to be written in. If you want to, you can always participate in that as well. By the way, knowledge is king. You got to go to the best, the very best in the industry. That's Market Rebellion. Our educators are the best. They will show you how to do things the right way, giving you the best opportunities and tools to have as much success as possible. Folks, have a great day of trading.